everyone, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to be making this crystal kite bracelet for you today. The crystal kite bracelet is a number of different stitches that are added together, both increasing and decreasing peyote, as well as some herringbone and some right angle weave. And it is going to be incorporating 11-0, 15-0 seed beads, as well as some of our Potomac crystal rivolis, and also some of the Potomac crystal rondelles. So this all is going to come together with each little component adding on to the next. I have some sample pieces here that are going to be used to show you exactly how the piece is looking as you create and make the back of it, and then some of the different alternatives that you can use at the top. I'll also be using a seed bead toggle in order to close this all off. For the materials for this bracelet, which you could easily make into a pair of earrings or a pendant or something else if you didn't want to do the whole bracelet, you're going to need approximately 6 rivolis. The rivoli color that I'm using here are a combination of the magic copper and the magic blue color in our crystal rivolis. If you need any of these materials, you can go to one of our Potomac bead stores, or you can actually shop online with us. There's a link on the left to the different categories here that are used. Also in the description underneath this video here, there'll be a list of the materials and links to those as well. So get about 6 of them depending on the size of the wrist, or if you just want to make a single unit, you can just use 1. I'm going to be using 2 colors of 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to be using the cranberry gold luster 11-0, and I'm also using the silver lined dark topaz in the 11-0 color. I'm going to brighten it up a little bit with my 15-0s in the galvanized Duracoat, the galvanized dark yellow seed bead here. And then for my Potomac crystal rondelles, I'm using the crystal slipperet, which have just a little bit of a purple shine to them. You're going to be using 3 of the crystals per unit. So if you're doing 6 or 7 long of the crystals, you can just times it by 3 and then add 2, 1 for each end. I'm going to put this all together with some 0.006 Wildfire beading thread, and I'm doing that in my green color. And then I'm going to be using 2 different needles, 10s and 12 needles. So I have 10s here to work up a lot of it, and then 12s when you get to the very outer edge. If you want, you can do the whole thing with a 12, that's up to you. In addition to my needle and my thread, I also have a thread burner here, and I'm using the Wildfire cord cutter, which is a thread burner. I'm working on a bead mat. And then close by, I have some super new glue as well as a flat or a needle nose pliers in order to help you to thread your needle. To get started, we're going to be dumping out little piles of all of our materials and picking up 1 of our Potomac crystal rondelle or Potomac crystal rivolis in order to get this project started. You want to start with about 5 feet of your beading thread. That's going to be a manageable amount in order to work with. And we're going to be building, like I said, the first unit by itself here, just like I've done here. And then I'll be explaining how to add on each unit. You can make these as long or as short. You could do something different on the sides, but we're going to be making this crystal kite here with the pattern that I have here with all those different stitches involved. So to explain the actual back of the crystal kite here, I have one that has been left open with blues and greens. I haven't put a crystal in it, so I can show you guys as I'm working with it what it looks like from the back, and then also kind of how we're closing that up. I attempted it a number of different ways with the back. This here was using a herringbone and peyote style, and then I took out some stitches so that way my crystal could fit. But I ended up liking the way that it looked with actually starting out with right angle weave. So that's what we're going to start out with in order to make our little kite bezel in order to put our crystal inside. I have my 5-foot piece of thread here, and what I'm going to do is add a stop bead to the end of the thread. You want to pick up a 15-0 bead and let that, or I'm sorry, 11-0 bead, and let that go down to the end of your thread about 2 inches from the base of the thread. Take your needle and go up the bead 2 times away from the stop bead and away from the extra 2 inches of thread. This bead will eventually come off of our project, but we're going to use that to get it started. I'm going to be doing my right angle weave with my cranberry luster beads, and that's right here in the back where that magic green seed bead is, or right here where the pearls are, in this one. If you don't know right angle weave, because this is a little bit more complicated bracelet and you're adding a number of weaves together, you may want to stop the video and actually watch a right angle weave video of mine before actually attempting this. Right angle weave is based on groups of 4 beads. You're going to be creating squares out of these 4 beads with 1 needle. I have 4 of my cranberry luster beads on my needle, and I'm going to let those all drop down next to my stop bead. Once they're there, I'm going to take my needle back up through 3 of the beads, going from the stop bead towards the long length of thread, and that's going to turn it to make it into a little box. So you're going to have 2 beads on the side facing one way and 2 beads facing the other way. Each additional unit of right angle weave that we add, we're going to use 3 beads. 3 beads are going to be used to create the next box, adding on to the bead that you are coming out of. That's going to be the 4th. I'm going to add 3 more beads onto my needle, and I'm going to take my thread and needle through the bead that the thread is coming out of there at the end, but in the opposite direction, towards the thread. That's going to circle up the beads as I pull them through and create my next little right angle weave box. In order to get to a position where I need to add my next, I'm also going to go through 2 more seed beads in that same circular fashion. Give a nice tight pull, and then you have your 2 right angle weave units done. Don't worry if it's not looking exactly like a box. Because we're using regular seed beads and not delicas, it's going to be a little bit floppy until we add on. I want to go ahead now and add another right angle unit. So 3 more beads go on. My needle's going back through the bead that the thread is coming out of towards the thread. Adding those beads on. Generally, I will flip my project, and that way I can sew away from me. I'm going to sew through 2 of the other beads, the first 2 beads that I just added in my group of 3, and that's going to get me to the side in order to add my next right angle unit. I have 3 on. I'm going to do a 4th unit. See, I flip it after I sew it. And I want to get 6 units long. So that was my 4th. I have my 5th that I'm going to do here. And if you have trouble remembering how many units, you can also set your beads out in groups of 3. That will help you keep track of how many units you're at. The other hint that I have for people is actually count the middle. So you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That way if everything's not pulled so tight and it's not looking like a box, you can still see the units in the center. I'm going to put on my 6th unit here. And as I'm adding this 6th unit, I actually want to turn the corner. I want to create a box. So I have my 6 units going lengthwise here. I want to bring the next one actually coming down. To do that, I've been going through 2 extra beads to get to the end of my right angle unit to add the next. This time what I'm going to do is go through all 3 beads that I've added onto my last right angle unit. So that 6th little addition, I'm going through all 3 beads. That's going to help to turn the corner, so now I can get the right angle weave going the opposite direction. Continuing on, adding 5 more right angle units. And you're going to do this continued right angle pattern 4 more times, and then we're going to get ready to turn the corner for the next. So I have 5 added on. I have my original one that I turned the corner, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to add my 6th one and turn the corner again. This time I want to turn the corner so that way my beads can come down towards me. When I do that, I need to get my needle in place to start the right angle weave there. So instead of going through 2 beads, I'm only going through 1 bead. So at the first corner you go through all 3 beads that you added. At the second corner here you just go through 1 additional. I'm going to add then 5 more right angle units, just like we've been doing. And then I'll turn the corner yet once again in order to make my box. So you're going to continue on adding down so that way we get the whole way so we're even across. So there's 1, 2, and I need to add 4 more units. So I'm getting my 6th unit finished here. And when I finish the 6th unit, again, we're going to turn the corner so that way we can finish up our little square here. To do so, I'm going to go through all 3 seed beads that I just added. And that's going to get me ready then to have that corner be turned. Now when you do the last section here, you actually already have your first right angle weave unit and your last. So you have your first and your 6th. You need to make 4 right angle units, 3 in the traditional style, and then I'll show you how we add the 5th one in line, which would be the 4th one created here. And I'm going to add that right on to the last. So I'm finishing up my side here, and I've got the 4 right angle units completed, the one that was already part of side 3, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4. To finish off the 5th, what I want to do is actually connect it to the first right angle unit that we did. I've added 1 seed bead onto my needle here, and I'm going to pick up the top bead of the initial right angle unit and connect those 2 sides together. I'm going to pick up 1 more bead after coming out of that bead there, and I'm going to sew through the last bead, that corner bead that my thread is coming out of from the 4th row, or the 4th unit. When I do that and give a pull, that connects the 2 right angle units. So then you're left with your little square here. To make this square a little bit stiffer and a little bit easier to work with, we're actually going to be adding some beads around the outer edge. That outer edge bead is going to make it easier for us then to work on the inside. So you could go directly from here to the inside. We're going to go to the outside just to make it a little bit more stable to work with, and then we'll come back in and I'll show you how to add on the inside. To get to the outside, we're actually just going to go up the side here of that 4th right angle unit, and you're getting to the outside. If you ever see thread connecting kind of up the side, you know that you're not exactly doing the right angle weave correctly. That's why I said if you're not positive with right angle weave, you may want to stop this video, actually watch the right angle weave so you make sure you get your base correct. When I'm on the side here, I want to connect to all the outside beads on the right angle edge. While I'm connecting to those outside beads and adding that, I'm also going to be adding my crystal kind of in the corners here. So to start, I'm going to be using my silver lined dark topaz beads. I'm going to start coming out one of the side beads and add one of those going up. So this is another color, so that way it makes you easier to keep track. When my thread and needle are coming out of one of the side beads, I add another and sew through another one of my side right angle units. Add another, sew through the side. As you get to the corner, you'll notice right when you're at the corner here, that's when you're going to pick up one of your crystals and add a crystal in the corner. This is the first one that we are creating, the first little kite, so you're always adding crystals to the corners. So you're going to be adding 4 crystals. You will see a tiny bit of thread exposed, but you want to make sure, right now the thread's crossing over, you want to make sure to pull it nice and tight and try to get that bead cornered as much as possible. When you're coming out the side then, add another 11-0 in that topaz color and just sew right up along the side. This is actually how we're going to transform from our right angle weave stitch to our peyote stitch as we get to the side. You can see some thread is showing. Don't worry about that too much. As you work with it, you're going to have that thread disappear. So I'm sewing up the sides here, adding my seed beads in place. You're going to end up with 5 seed beads per side. 5 new seed beads, I should say, per side. Once you add your 5th, you should be at your corner. Add your crystal and proceed up the side. Give a nice pull at each corner too, and that's going to pull any extra thread that you show. Continue to go the whole way around the project, adding your 5 11-0s in between the side beads of your right angle weave, and add your crystals at the corner. And this is going to take place the whole way around in your little kite square. As you're doing your project here and you're getting ready to add the 4th crystal, you have your stop bead right there. If you want to, you can pull your stop bead, and usually you can do this just with your fingers. You can pull your stop bead down a little bit out of the way. If you can't pull it down, you can put a needle on and kind of push it off to the side by going back through the stop bead. But I like to just push it out of the way, and that way it's not going to become part of my project. You're just going to continue on them, and you have 2 more of your 11-0s to add. Once those 2 11-0s are added in place, I'm going to go through my project. So I'm coming out the first of my silver line dark topaz bead that I added. And that's going to take my whole corner here then, and that whole kite has been created. What I want to do now is actually get to the center of the kite, and I want to decorate up the center of the kite, and that makes the back of my bezel for my crystal. I'm going to take my needle and thread to the base of the right angle weave unit that is below where the thread is. What I mean by that is that you want to take your thread and needle down after coming out of one of your cranberry luster beads. I'm going to follow my thread line so that way I don't see any extra thread. Getting a little twisted up here with all the threads. So as I was saying, you want to go through the right angle weave line, and you're going to come down through those cranberry luster beads and out one of the cranberry luster beads on the inside. And when you're going on the inside, you're going to do the same thing that we did for the outside where you added the dark topaz. On the inside, we're going to be adding them as well. And you can see here we're going to be adding 3. So that blue line there is what we're adding. When we get to the corners, we're actually going to be joining together almost like a reverse herringbone stitch. So I'm out in the middle of one here. I'm going to add my 11-0, sew up through the side bead, add another 11, sew up through the side. Here on the corner, because I have one more to add down here, I'm going to skip over, so you have 2 beads right there that look like they're a herringbone stitch. I'm going to skip over in between, not adding anything, and go through the next bead on the outer edge as I turn the corner. And that's going to pull that corner in and make it look like it's sitting in that herringbone stitch. When you're talking about a herringbone stitch, you're going to see it really well here with the pearls, that it's going to sit nice and tight on a V. Here with these pearls here, you can see it right along this angle, adding nice and tight right along. In between then, the beads on the inner row, you're adding your silver lined topaz. So I'm going to add 3 of those, sewing right up the line. Once you have 3 added on each side, you know that your next step then is to sew through 2 beads at once, creating that corner. And pulling that in. Here on the side again, add 3 more of your 11-ohs. And you can do these in the same color, you can do multiple different colors. That's up to you what you want the look to have to it. But I'm doing a different color. And after you get, like I said, it's a nice idea, even for the right angle weave, if you're a new beader, to set them out in piles. Same here, you can put 3 beads so you know when you're at your corners. And as you go around, you're connecting those corners by going through 2 of the right angle beads. And I come here to the side, and you can see it starting to take shape. And this keeps it from being flimsy like it was. And it's also creating the base here for your rivoli to sit inside. Once you're sewing up and you have your 3 beads in a line, you're going to create that corner again. The corner creates that herringbone style going through the 2 beads on the right angle weave right there at the corner. Give a nice tight pull. And because we started in the center of our project, I still have 1 more of my 11-ohs to add. And then you can sew just right along the line and coming out. What I'm going to do now is actually switch to a peyote stitch. When I'm peyote stitching, I'm going to be coming out of my silver lined topaz beads. So I'm going to be coming out of those silver lined topaz beads. I'm going to be adding 1 more of my silver lined topaz beads in that peyote structure. That's going to put 2 beads coming out of the peyote stitch, and then on my corners I'm going to grab, just like I did on the last row, grab those 2 of those silver lined dark topaz beads and pull them together. I'm starting right here on one of my corners, so I'm going to go to the other side and grab my silver lined bead and sew through. You're going to see a little bit of thread exposed there on the corner, and then when you pull, it tightens up that corner and not as much thread is exposed. Once I'm coming out that silver lined dark topaz, add another one and then sew through the next one in your row. Add 1 more, sew through the next one in the row. That puts you out to a corner. When you're at the corner, you're not adding any beads, you're just going to skip the corner and sew through the first silver lined topaz on the other row, on the other side I should say. Pick up a bead, sew through. Pick up a bead, sew through. At the same time, if you want, you can grab the next silver lined topaz on the next side, because that's at your corner. Push your beads down and in and continue going around your circle. So you're going around all 4 sides here, adding those 11-ohs in place. Again, 2 per side. And then after you add your second, you know that it's time to do your corner. And again, that corner is always going to take that herringbone look here. And you can see the beads kind of sitting up on an angle. You can see it really well with those pearl beads sitting up on an angle. As I come around to my last side here, I'm going to add my last 2 11-ohs in place. And as I do that, I am going to connect those 2 corner beads one more time. When I connect the 2 corner beads, I want to go through that corner bead as well as the first of the silver lined topaz bead that you put on in this last go round. So you're going to be coming out one of those 2 beads that you just put on. That's going to put you out in the middle of your project here and right out in order to add a row. It's almost like stepping up if you're doing a tubular peyote. So that's kind of the idea there. This next row, we're just going to add our red color, and we're going to basically create that little box. Here you can see I added the pearl color in between. When you're on the sides, you're going to connect again, just as if you were doing that same little herringbone design. So we're going to add one of our cranberry luster beads, sew through the corners, add a cranberry luster bead. You can see I'm turning my project as I work with it, sew through the corners, and keep adding. So you're going to end up with 4 beads altogether that you're adding this go round. Once you have that 4th bead added and you've gone through your corners there, I want you to do another step up, which would mean that you're going to come out your cranberry luster bead there, and that's going to put you in place to add one more little bead in the center. The little bead here in the center we're going to design and add with just one of our 15-0 beads. So you're going to take your gold 15-0, add it, and sew through your next cranberry luster. And you're actually going to add 4 of these, so you're going to add 1 between each of your cranberry luster beads. Once you have the 4th done and added, we're going to come back to our project here and move our thread towards the outer row. So you can see now here you have that fun little bottom of your kite created. So you can see here as it takes shape, we're actually going to be pulling the sides back a little bit. When we pull the sides back a little bit, we're going to be doing more peyote, decreasing on the outside and kind of pulling in those corners as well. To get to the outside, I want to sew along my peyote here and along that right angle weave, so that way you don't see any of the beads or any of the thread between the beads. To do that, I'm coming out near one of my corner units here of my beads that look like the herringbone stitch. I'm going to take my needle and thread the whole way up that herringbone stitch to get to the outside. That way it's not going to, you're not going to see any of the thread, and it doesn't affect the shape of our box. When you're coming out the side here, you're going to come out right near one of your little added peyote beads here, that dark topaz bead that was on the side. And what I want to do is sew through that so that way you don't see any thread down towards my project. And my needle and thread are now coming out of that silver line dark topaz bead. Coming out of that silver line dark topaz bead, I'm going to do some peyote stitch. So I'm going to connect to all of these silver line dark topaz beads that are sticking up a little bit. When I connect to those, I'm going to be using another row of the silver line dark topaz. You can see here with the blush and the pearl color. I'm going to add one more row of those here right along the edge. I'm going to do that the whole way around my unit. So you're going to have your needle coming out, add a bead, and this is the peyote stitch, go through a bead. You're going to add a bead, go through a bead. And you're going to do this the whole, like I said, the whole length of the project. So basically the whole way around. The only thing that's going to be different is when you get to the corners. And we'll go over that. When you get to the corners and you've gone through your last of your silver line dark topaz, you're going to do like we were doing previously, where you're basically going to be skipping over the bead here and sewing into the next of that little bead in the center here. I'm going to be using that peyote stitch to add one little bead in between. So you're going to continue that peyote stitch, but that bead there is going to lay right in front of my crystal. So I'm basically skipping over to the other side right in front of the crystal, just adding one bead as if my peyote stitch was going straight in a row. Give a pull, and that's going to pull that row of peyote stitch that we're doing right now in and start to get that little kite box that we want to create. Continue around, adding your 11 O's on each side. So you're going to end up with 4 11 O's on each side. Coming out the last 11 O on the corner here after you add your peyote. You're going to add one more bead, skip in front of the crystal. Make sure that every time you're doing this, you're going in front of the crystal. And that's going to pull it in the correct manner. And you're just going to continue on going the whole way around doing this, adding 4 11 O's to the outside and then skipping over the corner to continue with your peyote stitch. So I'm the whole way around the outer edge, and I'm just going to pull my last corner in by adding one of my 11 O's, sewing through the 15 O on the, or the 11 O, I'm sorry, on the other side. And at that same time, I'm going to sew up through the first 11 O of the row previous that was added. So this is a step up for those of you that know circular peyote. That's going to bring, or I'm sorry, tubular peyote. That's going to bring those edges in and start to get that look of that seamed edge. What we're going to do now is continue that same design. So we're going through here on the edge, creating that peyote. I'm going to continue this row on this one here with my silver lined dark topaz, adding beads in between my peyote. This is going to be decreasing, so I'm going to only have 3 on the outer edge instead of 4. Once I have that third bead in place, I'm actually going to be on my corner. The corner we're going to continue to decrease and to pull in, but what we're going to do is continue our peyote stitch. So a bead goes on, and then you're going to pull up that bead that you just add in the center. Another bead goes on, and you continue to the next row, or the next side, I'm sorry, of your peyote stitch. That's going to put 2 beads in the corner. Continue on, adding 3 peyote bead, or 3 seed beads on the side, and then 2 in the corner. So I'm adding 3 here just in a peyote stitch. And I know this is going quick, and it does help to have prior knowledge of peyote or doing bezeling. But if you don't, you can do this still. Just take a little break, watch the peyote videos, and then come back in. I'm here on the corner, so I'm going to add an 11 O, sew through the bead that I added the last go around in front of my crystal, add another 11 O, and get to the next side. As you do this, you want to pull it nice and tight, and that's going to create again more of that cupping effect of that kite shape for your crystal to sit inside. So I'm to my last corner here, and I'm getting ready to step up. I'm adding an 11 O on either side of the bead that I added in front of the crystal. And then I'm going to step up, going through 2 beads at once, going through the row of peyote that I was adding to, as well as the first bead that I added this row on that go round. Now I'm going to be adding in more of my 11 O seed beads. This time I'm going to switch over to my cranberry color, and I'm going to be adding 2 cranberry color beads on each side. So we went from 3 and now we're at 2. When I get to the corners, so I have 2 beads on, and you can see it right there in the peyote stitch. When I get to the corners, I'm going to actually be seaming them up just a little bit more. To do that, I'm going to add a 15-0 seed bead and sew through my 2 corner beads, joining that together a little bit more, and add another 15-0 seed bead, and then continue on the sides. Pull that nice and tight, and that's going to create a little almost tooth edge there along the side. 2 more cranberry beads go on the side here. Push that tail out of the way so it doesn't confuse you. So I got 2 cranberry beads going on the side. And then when I get to the corner, I add 1 15-0. Sew through the 2 15-0s that are on the corner. Continue on the whole way around. Oops. Adding the 2 15-0s on each corner, giving a nice tight pull in, and then your 2 cranberry beads in between the peyote stitch. I know with this detailed work that it's hard a lot to see what is going on, but again, you do want to kind of have a little bit of prior knowledge. I have my 15-0 on now, and I'm sewing through those 2 beads in the corner. When I come out those 2 beads, I add another 15-0 and continue on with the peyote stitch. Give a tight pull at each corner. As I'm at this last go round, we're going to get ready to place in our crystal. On my last 15 in place, I'm going to sew through the previous line here of my 11-0 seed beads that I was working with, and also up through that cranberry bead that I just added. So that's my step up. And there you have your little bezel ready for your crystal to sit inside. So that's pretty much the point that we've gotten to here. With your bezeling, what you want to do then is you're going to get ready to drop your crystal in. And you can see it's still a little bit large, because what we need to do is actually create a point and actually pull our bezel in a little bit more. But you can see right now the crystal sitting in there, how pretty it looks right on the pointed edge. As we go around one more time, we're going to be creating our last little V section. That's going to create, here you can see with the pearl, that little pointed edge. To do so, when you're coming out your cranberry bead there, add 1 more cranberry bead, sewing through, and that's going to create that little point of 3 beads. As I get to the corners, I want to pull my beads in even more. So to do that, I'm going to add a 15-0, sew through the 2 15-0s that are on the corner. And that's going to create that herringbone corner and pull those in. Once I'm out of a 15-0, I want to add a 15-0. Sew through a cranberry bead. And on that corner, I'm actually going to back up. Sorry about that. Forgot to put in our 11-0 there. So I'm coming out the corner there, and you add your 15-0 on. In between the beads, rather than going right across, you're going to add another one of your 11-0s and then go across. When you're coming out the 15-0, you're going to add a 15-0 and add a cranberry bead, or through a cranberry bead. Add the cranberry bead for the point. Add a 15-0 when you're coming out. When you're in the center here of the V, of that little point at the end, that's where I'm adding one of my silver line dark topaz 11-0 beads here for that corner. skipping over to the next 15-0. Still give a nice tight pull. That's pulling all of those corner beads in. When you're on the side coming out of 15-0, add a 15-0. Through the cranberry, add a cranberry. So through the next cranberry bead on line there. And when you're coming out before the 15, add a 15. When you're in the corner, one of the silver line dark topaz, and through a 15. And it's your choice whether or not you want to switch colors, add colors. That's just all your details and what you want to do. I'm going to add that 15-0 there. I'm coming up to add my last little point of my cranberry bead. Once you're there, I'm going to add my last 15-0 before my last corner. Add my corner bead, which is my 11-0. Go through the 15-0 on the other side. Add the last 15-0 and sew up the 2 of the cranberry beads, the row of 2 of that peyote stitch, and also the pointed one. Basically, you're sewing up to the top of that triangle. Once you have those all in there and added nice and tight, your bezel is ready for your crystal to actually go in and sit. And you can see how pretty it looks even without the crystal. It has that nice little edging. You can see here the different designs kind of that you can pick to do at that edging. We're going to slide our rivoli in, kind of in the side, pop it down. Make sure when you do that your beads are up a little bit. If you want to, you can even add the crystal rivoli into place before you do that last line. Now it's nestled nicely in here, and all I'm going to do is add a row of some 15-0s here on the sides in order to pull it nice and tight together. So after sewing that last one in, you're going to be coming out the cranberry color here, and you want to go the whole way through all your cranberry color beads. That's going to keep a nice point of that cranberry there and a nice point to the end of your peyote. When you get to the corners here, you're going to go into your 15-0. We're going to add 2 15-0 seed beads and sew over to the next 15-0. At that same time, if you want, you can sew through all of your cranberry luster beads. Straight over to the 15-0. And in between the 15-0s on the corner, you're going to add 2 more 15-0s and go straight across through all of your cranberry beads. You can change the colors up as much or as little as you want when you're working with this. So have fun with the different colors that you can use. And as you're going the whole way around, you're going to do pulling, or you're going to pull your thread so that way that crystal is really tightly in there. Coming around to my last side now, getting my last of my 15-0s on. And what I'm going to do is actually get ready to finish off my thread. If you want to, because it is a bezel set cab, if you would like to, what you can do is actually go around the cab face one more time of that crystal, and that's really going to set it in. But you have a lot of thread going on here, so it should be fine. But if you want to, you're more than welcome to. What I'm going to do is actually sew over towards my initial thread towards the corner. When I do that, I want to go down the beads on an angle, so that way I don't see any thread exposed. So I'm going down the peyote line and coming out one of my cranberry beads there of my initial right angle weave. Going to the back here, I'm going to sew through some of that right angle weave right along the right angle weave line, so that way I don't see any additional thread. And once I'm to where my stop bead is, I'm going to take my stop bead off, take my needle off, and get ready to tie these together. When I tie these together, it's actually going to be the end of my thread, And I want to tie it towards the back so that way I don't see any of the thread exposed. Although this bracelet is quite reversible, that if you want the look of just the seed beads at the top, you can do that and just wear it with the crystals facing down. But I have those nice tight knots that I'm creating. I'll drop just a tiny bit of super glue on to my thread and then burn down my thread edges. Once you have one done, we're going to proceed with the exact same technique that we did going around the circles by adding more beads on, or more rivolis onto our bracelet. To do so, it's going to be the exact same, except in our opening, instead of adding a fourth crystal as we go around, we're going to connect to one of the crystals that's already attached to our bracelet. So we're going to get ready. I'm going to show you how to attach that crystal. So I'm going to go ahead and do my right angle weave cube, where I get ready to do that right angle weave with the 6 right angle units on each side. And then as I come around with my crystals, I'm going to show how we actually connect to the previous little kite here. So I already have one of my new crystals put on, and I'm going to show you basically how to attach another one. I did this just to also show the difference in colors, so I reversed the colors that I did the right angle then with the opposite color just to give it kind of a different look. So when you flip over, it's a little bit more contrast. That one is with that luster and then the other one is with the silver line. And we're going to switch vice versa, basically switching right along the line. I'm going to get ready to add my next unit onto my bracelet. However, as we did the first one, we went and we did the outside first. As I'm adding to these, I'm realizing it's easier just to do the inside and then do the outer edge as we're getting ready to do the top. So just showing, instead of going right to the outer edge here after I've attached the two, what I'm going to do is just continue on with the inner loop here. And instead of taking my needle to the outside, I'm taking my needle right there to the inner loop. And then I'm just going to continue on, just like I did previously, with adding my beads to the inside. Because I'm not adding the outer loop, it's going to make it a little bit flimsy on the inside, but that'll kind of straighten itself out as you go through and add to the outside. But I'm going to skip the outside to start with on this one and go to the inside. That way it's not as much holding the whole project as I'm working on it. So go ahead and finish your inside, and then we will attach to the other crystal kites. So just showing now, I'm getting to the outer corner. So I did the base first, and now I'm coming back and adding in my beads. One thing when you're adding your next bead on in the row, if you're doing a necklace or a bracelet, it doesn't really matter which, but when you're doing the next thing, you want to make sure to add your crystal onto the previous row. If you don't, you end up like my examples, where I forgot to attach them, and now I have 2 different ones that I'll need to do a third and attach on 2 corners. So that's solvable if you do forget. If you forget, again, you can also just make them into 2 earrings or link them with another piece of beading, so you can do that as well. I want to make sure to link them at a corner that is not my starting corner, so not where my stop bead is. That way, when I do have the tension being pulled, it's not being pulled at an area where the stop bead is. So when I attach, I just want to make sure that I'm not at where I started. Because I am here, and I'm going to pull out and kind of show you guys why I did this. I'm here on the side. You have to think about both sides. So if I'm here on the side and I say, oh, okay, I'm adding here because that's not where the stop bead is, the stop bead is going to be diagonal. So you want to actually add on one of the beads beside the stop bead. So if you get to that, you lay it down and you say, oh, that's not right. You can just take your needle and thread, sew back out the side, if it'll let you. Sometimes it gets stuck on the thread. And you're going to take that crystal off and add right there in that place. So this way I'm going to add this crystal here because it's next to the stop bead. That way the area where it is joined is never going to be at the stop bead. So I'm going to remove this crystal and get ready then to attach to the crystal that's already there. When I attach to the crystal that's already there, I'm also going to kind of design that a little bit. I'm going to come, when I'm at the corner, into the crystal across, going through the crystal, and that's going to be my immediate first connection. I'm going to sew into the bead on the other side, and that's how those beads are going to join. In order to join the beads, what I want to do then is create a little bit more of a connection point, because there is a fair amount of weight. I kept going back and forth on decorating it, but because there is weight, I am going to decorate the project when I'm working with it. And whoops, I came back towards the project. And I want it to look similar. So I'm actually going to go down those beads, sorry about that, towards the outside. So to get that project then connected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down one of my rows to almost that herringbone piece. And then I'm going to come back up the beads here on the corner, and I'm going to go straight across the piece to the other side. So this time I'm not going through the crystal. I'm just going straight across to the other side. I'm going straight across to that brown bead there because I am alternating colors. So I'm coming out of one of my cranberry luster, and I'm going to go into the brown bead after adding 3 of my 15-ohs. If you want to, you can turn it backwards so you can work with it a little bit better, because you are going to want to connect basically and sew in the back of it. You have those 3 beads on, and your needle might get a little bit tight. If you are working with a pony needle, you should be fine with a 10. If you're working with a tulip needle, you may need a smaller size because the eyes of the tulip are a little bit bigger. I'm then sewing through the 2 back behind on the previous one, sewing down the one that my thread is coming out of right next to my crystal. So basically I'm just making a big loop. I'm going to add 3 more of my 15-ohs and sew straight down the other side here. Once I do that, I now have it connected at 3 points. So there's 3 points now where that is connected, so there's not as much stress and wear on that area. Now what I'm going to do is just continue on with my pattern of adding my alternate 11-0 color in to my design. And you can see why I did the middle first, because you're starting to get a fair amount of weight hanging off as you're working with it, and also tons of areas that it can catch your thread. So that's why I did the middle first, so I wasn't working as much with the beads hanging off. Then when you get to the end of the next row here, you're just going to add your other crystal on and continue on with your pattern. So I'm just going to go in here, add my crystal on, and continue right down the line, then adding the outer crystal, and then I'm going to get ready to build up the sides and add my rivoli in to my next little kite. I'm at another connection point, so I figured I would show you again how to do that connection. So I'm on the side here, and here's where my stop bead is, so I want that to be up or down. I don't want to connect to either of those sides. I'm here on the corner, and I'm coming out of my right angle weave row. I've hooked onto my crystal on the other side, and I'm going to go down 2 rows of that herringbone there, which was created. I pull that nice and tight so that it's right there in the corner. I'm going to skip over to the other side. Basically, we're working with this group of 4 beads here that are all the same color because they're the corner herringbone unit, or I'm sorry, the corner right angle unit. And I'm going to come out the top there, right on the side of one of the crystals, inside of the crystal. When I'm on the side there, that's when I'm going to add my 3 15-ohs. So I'll put my 3 15-ohs on my needle. So clear across to the other side, straight through to the crystal that or to the 11-0 seed bead that is connected to the crystal. So the one right there, and out. Here's where I said I flip it over. And you're going to work with the unit of 4 underneath here, so you should be working with all the same color, going straight across 2, going up the bead next to the crystal on the other side. When you come out that bead, you're going to add 3 more 15 O's, and this is going to be for the other side then. And then when I come into the other side, I'm going to go down the bead next to my crystal and out. Give a nice tight pull, kind of straighten out your project, flip it over, and then you just continue on right up the side, adding your beads in place. So I've gotten to the end of my pillowed kites here, and for these crystal pillowed kites, what I'm going to be doing is actually creating my toggle clasp out of seed beads. So you could do a different clasp if you wanted to do one of the Potomac crystal buttons. That would look really pretty as well. I ended up having to do 6 of my little kites here, and that's going to fit my wrist. It's going to be a little bit big. I wanted to go a little bit bigger rather than smaller, since I tend to have a small wrist. So I didn't want to go too big or too small, and be that I'm the only one that's able to wear it. So if you do have a kind of a standard size wrist, 6 is going to get you. I could have stopped with 5, but again, just in case I'm not keeping this piece, which I'm tempted to do, I added that 6th one on. So I'm going to get into doing a toggle clasp, and the toggle clasp I'm then going to connect to my piece. So I'm just going to kind of set my piece off to the side. When I'm doing my toggle clasp right here, what I want to do is I'm going to be using my 11 O's. I'm going to use the alternate color, so I'm going to use my brown color, and they're kind of mixed in right now with my purpley colors. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the brown color, and I'm going to put on 16 onto a piece of thread that has a bead stopper onto it. So I have my 16 beads, and this is going to be a flat, even count peyote. I could have done 14, 16, 18. You can really change up the size of your toggle bar and loop, but here I have 16. I think it's going to look nice there with my project. So that's how I determined how many. Again, I do have another video showing how to do these seed bead toggles. You can look there if you'd like. And right now what I'm going to do is start and continue my peyote. So I pick up a 17th bead, and I'm going to sew back towards my stop bead through bead number 15. Pull nice and tight, and then I'm going to add my 18th bead and go back through bead number 13. So I'm always going to go back through the odd count beads doing this peyote stitch, and you should be familiar with peyote stitch by now since we did some of it, and also you have the opportunity to watch the more detailed video. But I'm just going to continue to do my second row here of my peyote stitch, and then we'll show turning to create the next row as well. So here I've gotten done my 3rd row, because when you do the first 2 rows, adding 16 beads, that's actually 2 rows of the peyote at once. If you count on a diagonal, you can count and see how many rows you have. That's an easy way to do it. Or you can count 2 actual rows that you've created, and that's how you know how many peyote stitches we've done. So we've done our 3rd row here, and you add 8 beads each time. Once you get to the end, you'll be coming out right next to your stop bead, and you're just going to turn the other direction and continue on with your peyote. This will be our 4th row as we add here. And what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be looking to add 6 rows. So after this 4th row, you want to do a 5th and a 6th row. And then I'll show you how we're going to round out that toggle bar. So I went ahead actually and did 8 rows. 6 was a little kind of small when it came to my bar, but I decided to keep going and do 8 rows because I'm actually going to decorate the sides with my crystals of my bar here. Once you have an even number of rows, and again you can count down 2 rows on the side and say 4 plus 4 is 8. Once you have that even number, you're going to round out your project. You can also make sure that 1 bead is sitting, when you look at just the first 2 rows here, that 1 bead is sitting to one side and 1 bead is sitting to the other. So 1 is up and 1 is down. That's going to create your seam that you're making. When we go back to create the rounded bar now, basically what we're going to be doing is creating a little tube of peyote stitch. I'm going to take my thread and needle, which are coming out of one side of my peyote stitch, and I'm going to go straight across to the first bead on the other side. When I pull that, it's going to create a little 4 grouping right there on the corner, and that's going to be my toggle bar width. or diameter. Once I'm there, I'm going to scoot back to the other side and go through bead, the first bead popping out, and I'm just going to go zigzagging. So there's going to be a bead sticking up on each side, just like peyote stitch, and I'm just going to go back and basically I'm seaming up that row. So I'm just going from one side to the other. If you can, sometimes like this, I'll catch 2 beads at once, but you're just going from one side to the other and seaming up the row. You're going to seam up the row the whole way along your project, and then once you have it seamed up, we're going to add some bling on the sides with our crystals. Again, if you do need a little bit more help with this technique, you can watch the toggle video, which is a couple years old, and it's on our YouTube page as well. If you just look in the magnifying glass here right underneath the video, you can search for seed bead toggles, and that'll take you there. So again, this is an even count peyote, and then all I'm doing, you can see it's creating a seamless end for it. It is just going in and seaming up the sides. So I'm just going back and forth from one side to the other. When I get to the end here, I'm going to go back to the stop bead, move it out of the way, and I'm going to come back down that bead where the stop bead is towards the opposite end. And that's going to close up that loop. If your stop bead gets kind of twisted in there, just pull it out. But that is my bar now for my toggle. So you can see size-wise, I thought it looked nice with the bracelet. If you do want a couple less, you can do a couple less too. So I brought my thread and needle down that bead where the stop bead is, and that was to secure it up and to create that little folded over edge. What I'm going to do then is go up the bead that's next to that stop bead, so that way I'm coming out right at the top. When I'm coming out at the top here, I'm going to add a Potomac crystal, one of those rondelles, and I'm also going to add a 15-0 bead. I'm going back through the Potomac crystal, and what that's going to do is the 15-0 is going to be kind of on the side then, holding in that rondelle shape. I'm then going to take my needle and thread to the opposite side in my little peyote stitch. So again, when you see it, it is actually 4 beads right there in the center. I'm going from the bead that I'm coming out of diagonal to the bead on the other side. Make sure you don't catch your stop bead in there, in that loop, and push it out, and then pull. The reason I want to go from one side to the other is because I want my rondelle to sit correctly on top of my toggle bar. Once I have that, I'm going to go up the bead that's next to it, go through that rondelle one more time. So this is reinforcing that crystal there on the end. And it's almost like sewing a button. You're actually catching all 4 of those beads. Going through the 15-0, coming down the rondelle on the other side, and then you can see where you need to go, where it's not connected to, and you'll go there. I'm going to sew right along the seam then, the whole way down to the base of my toggle bar here, so that way I can add my crystal on the other side. To do that, I'm just going to weave in and out of my peyote stitch, going right along the line, and that way I make sure that I'm not showing any of my thread that I'm working with. Once you get to the end or the start of the toggle, we're going to put on the next crystal. So I'm almost to the other end here, and I'm going to pop out one of these corner beads. So again, you have your set of 4 right there. Just like sewing on a button, we're going to sew on our rondelle and our 15-0. Let those drop down and sew back through the rondelle. Go diagonal to the opposite side, sew through that seed bead. Give it a nice tight pull to make sure that your rondelle is down in place and that you don't see any extra thread showing. And you might need to hold your 15-0 for that. You're going to skip over to the bead that's next to it, go back up the rondelle, through the 15-0, down the rondelle, and then you're going to come back into the bead that has not had the rondelle kind of forced down it yet. Give a nice tight pull, and that's going to sit that crystal right there. All I'm going to do now is basically get rid of my thread. And to get rid of my thread so I don't see any extra showing, because I'll actually create the link there for my toggle to go on with a new piece of thread. If you want to and you have a lot of extra thread, you can even keep this one on and basically just get to the middle of your project. And when you get to the middle of your project, in the middle of your peyote stitch, You're going to leave the needle and thread just hang out there for a second, and we'll show how you're going to attach it to the clasp after we make the loop for our toggle bar. So I've made my toggle bar, and I did that in this silver lined topaz color, that dark topaz, because I'm going to attach that to my purpley beads. On the other side here, where I have my brown beads that are ending, I'm going to make my loop out of purple. However, in order to make the toggle loop, we're actually going to be starting out with our 15-0 beads. We're going to be creating a little bit of almost a gear-like or a wheel, and that's how we're going to do our toggle bar. I have a piece of thread here that I have on my size 10 needle, and it is about 30 inches of thread. I like to have a little bit extra just in case. That way we can also use it to attach to the end of our clasp. How we're going to start out is we're going to start out by adding 40 of our 15-0 seed beads. You want to make sure to count and make sure that you have 40, because we do want to make sure that we're doing another thing of even count peyote. Instead of doing flat peyote, we're going to be doing circular peyote for the loop here. Our bar, we did the flat, the loop is going to be circular peyote. Once I get my 40 beads on, I'm just going to double count and make sure that I have 40 on. So I have 20 on right now. I'm going to add another 20 more, and I'm going to hold those right in the middle of my thread to begin with. So I have my 40 seed beads on here, and again I'm holding towards the middle of my thread. So I'm going to have a lot of thread on one end, or a lot of thread basically on both ends. That's going to allow me to work with both ends, because again we're creating almost like a tire. So what I want to do, so now that I have my 40 beads on, I have them in the middle of my thread. Again, I'm going to be working with both sides. And what I want to do is I want to take my needle and thread back through about 5 or 6 of those beads. I did double count and just make sure that I had 40 beads on, because again you don't want to have an error in the count, because that's going to screw up your even count peyote. As I'm going now, I'm going to continue with 3 rows of peyote stitch in that circular form, where I'm adding a bead and going through a next. So add one, skip the bead underneath, and sew through the next. You're going to do that the whole way around your loop and create 3 of that circular peyote. When you do circular peyote, you have to step up after each row. So once you have 20 of your 15-0s onto your string, we want to do that step up. If your thread kind of drives you crazy holding onto it, you can also add a stop bead, and that stop bead will come off the other end. So if you want to, you can just kind of add that on. You can even add a needle onto the other end of the thread, because we will be using that end. So if you need to, you can kind of add a stop bead to it. That's up to you. But you're going to continue adding on your 20 beads, and then I'll show you how to do the step up. So I'm getting ready to add my last of my 3rd row, because the first row of 40 beads is actually 2 rows of peyote. So I'm adding my last of this additional 3rd row that I've added. I'm going to go through the last bead in my original row of 40. And then I'm also going to come out of the first bead that I added in that 3rd row. That's going to put me on the outer edge and ready to add my 3rd row of my 15-0s. I'm going to continue to add that 3rd row of 15-0s, so 20 more 15-0s, the whole way around here in this circular peyote fashion. And what that's going to do is force it to lay more flat rather than rounded. As I do that, I'm going to get ready for the 5th row. And when I do my 5th row, I'm going to get in and add my cranberry color of my toggle ring. Because I did my bar in the brown color, I'm going to do my ring in that cranberry color. And as I go the whole way around here, once you do get to the end, you want to do that step up again, and we're going to do our 5th row with our 11-0 seed beads, switching out from the 15-0 seed beads. So continue the whole way around here, and you can see I have all that other thread just kind of hanging out there with my stop bead right in place, and you're going to continue on adding that 4th row of the 15-0s. So I finished that 4th row the 3rd time around here with my 15-0s. I've done my step up, and I'm exiting one of the outer beads that I just added, And now I'm going to go around my loop here with my 11 O's and continue the peyote stitch with the 11 O's. We're going to do this for a row, and then we're going to switch over to the other side. So you're going to keep going here, creating this, and then we're actually going to skip over, like I said, to the other side after we create some rows and get that kind of tire effect started. So I'm getting ready to put that last bead in place, and I have my 15-0 that I'm going to go through, and then I'm also going to go through the 11-0 that I just added. And while I'm working with this side, we'll go ahead and do another pass. So I'm coming out of that 11-0 that I just added, and we're going to do another go round, going around and adding 20 more of these 11-0s on this side, and just continuing on with that peyote stitch. So I got that second row of the 11-0s done, and actually I'm going to come back to my additional side here, and what I'm going to do is start my peyote stitch on this side here. So I have the thread and needle attached to the other side. I did attach a needle and attach a stop bead just so I didn't have to hold the thread, and I'm going to sew the stop bead off, and usually that just entails taking your thread and needle through the stop bead several times. You can usually move it along the thread as well. Once I have that off, I'm going to do an additional couple rows of my 11-0 peyote stitch, and that's going to start to do that tire effect like I was talking about. So you can see that as you get those two rows kind of started on the sides, it starts to have that wheel effect where the 15-0s are being kind of forced into the middle. I'm going to step up after I've added my last on this side here, and then I'm going to continue adding them on the secondary side. That's going to start more of that wheel. And once I have them in here, this is going to be 2 rows then of the 11s on each side. I'm going to do a third row on one of the sides, and then we're going to seam it together. Just like we did when we were doing the flat peyote for the toggle bar, we're also going to seam it up for the circular peyote too here as we do it. So as we're doing this tubular or circular peyote, we are going to seam those up as well. So I'm doing the second row, I'm going to do the third row, and then I'll come back to you guys after we do that third row, and we'll get ready to actually seam it up. So as you're working with it, those 15-0s are going to kind of force themselves to the bottom, and the 11-0s are going to start to have that almost bicycle tire track that they're going to start to sit up. So a second row and then a third row, and then we'll seam it up together. So as I finish my row here, I'm going to get ready now to seam up the actual project and to seam up the actual toggle portion. So when you're looking at it here, you have these rows that are connected, and they're going to be every other. So one side has just a row that is 2 rows, the other one has 3. And what we're going to do is we're going to seam those up now. To do that, we're going to take one of our needles that's coming out, and it really doesn't matter which side you go with, but we're going to zigzag just like we did previously. So to create that zigzag, we're just going to go through the beads that are sticking up on one side and then the other, just like we did when we were doing our toggle bar. As we do that, it's going to create a seamless line the whole way along our peyote loop here, and that really forces then the 15s to sit down at the very bottom and really creates this toggle loop to really look like a nice finished peyote piece. As I go the whole way around the loop now and go on that diagonal, you can see I kind of just go on a diagonal. That way I make sure I'm getting the right beads. I'm going to continue the whole way, and after I do a couple passes, I do a nice tight pull, do a couple more, and then I pull again. This helps so that you're not pulling every time, which can cause some friction on your beads and get it thrown off. So I'm going to continue going the whole way around there, finishing up my nice peyote toggle loop, and then I'll show you how I'm going to connect the loop and the bar onto my actual bracelet. So I have my loop and my bar completed, and I've just kept the needles and thread on those intact because I can use those as I connect it to my project. Because I do end with a crystal, I'm just going to connect right to the crystal, very much similar to the way that we did the connections as we were working on our kite pieces. So I'm going to be doing that on the side of the loop. Again, I'm creating the loop side here is going to attach to the brown, and then the bar side is going to attach to my end here. The bar side we might put out just a little bit further to give it some comfortable play to get on and off, but the loop we're going to do right off the end. I'm going to come out to one of my needle ends, it doesn't really matter which one, of my peyote stitch loop here, and I'm going to make sure that I'm at the outer edge of my loop. So I'm going to be kind of right there at the outer edge. When I'm there, I am going to pick up my loop here. I'm going to pick up my crystal. I'm going to sew through the crystal just like I did the whole bracelet. And then I'm going to sew back through one of these seed beads on the side that matches. So you see here that creates a little opening, those two. I'm going to sew back through towards the middle the other seed bead in that same row of the peyote. What that's going to do is set that right nice and that crystal in place. My thread and my needle, I'm going to go up a peyote row just to kind of hide my thread. And we want to reinforce this loop. To reinforce the loop, I'm going to come back out that same bead that my thread was coming out of before I went into the crystal, and I'm going to add my seed beads. Because it's a little bit more dramatic and a little bit further away, I'm going to add 4 seed beads instead of 3. So we have been adding 3, I'm going to add 4 15-ohs. Coming down the other side then, I'm going to catch on to those 2 beads here along the back, just like we did the whole time when we were making our little kite pillows. That's going to put those 4 beads on the side. Turning over to the back here, I'm sewing down, and again this is the same exact technique that we did as we added each of our crystal kite pillows together. Going back through that same 4 seed beads right out the crystals. When I'm coming out the side here then, again 4 of my 15-ohs go on. Flip my toggle loop back over, and I'm going to sew back through that same bead. I'm then going to basically get rid of my extra strings. If you want to, you can reinforce this one more time, but that's going to attach your loop to your project, no problem. I'm going to take my thread and needle to the back of my project and just create a bund to go through the next row of seed beads below rather than on top like we did the first go round. And then I'm going to take my thread and needle and go back to the starter thread here, and I'm just going to sew them in towards the center of the project and tie them off. So the loop is on, and we just need to connect the bar to the other side, and then we'll be all done with our project. So I have my loop on, and I tied off my thread here to the back of my project, and all I need to do now is create a loop for my bar. The loop for the bar is going to be done the exact same way that we did the loop for the toggle ring. I'm going to go through my crystal with my toggle bar, skip over to the other side of one of the beads on the same peyote stitch row, and go through that bead. Pull that in nice and tight. When I'm coming out that bead, on goes 4 of my 15-oh beads. And then same deal, go to the other side of your last kite and just sew them around. So it really is just using the exact same technique that you used when you added each of your little kite pillows together. You're going to add then 4 more beads on the other side, and same deal, just reinforce it and finish it off then as you go. When you finish it off, you can also finish off the little bead end here that's at the end, tie the threads together, and then we're done connecting, and we have our loop and our bar connected for our toggle. Once those are done, I'm going to go through my project and just glue down any of my thread ends and burn down those edges. So once you're all done gluing, and I used my Wildfire thread burner to burn off all my extra threads, you have your bracelet completely done. I really like how the toggle turned out. It looks like a completion of the bracelet and has that nice kind of color mix, just like we did the whole bracelet. Again, this is definitely a standard size wrist bracelet. It's a little bit large on me, but I have a smaller wrist. I could have gotten away with doing 5 of my kite pillows, but I did end up doing 6 and used the magic orchid, the magic copper, and the magic purple of the, or I'm sorry, the magic blue. I used all 3 of those since they come in packs of 2. So have fun making this. If you don't want to do the whole bracelet, I'll give you ideas for earrings. You can do pendants. You can really kind of elaborate and catch on and make it bigger by catching on to some of the crystals on the corners. And again, if you need any help with the toggle, you can go ahead and watch the toggle video, which would give you a little bit more extended details as far as the directions. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this video and have fun making this awesome kite pillow bracelet. If you do need any materials, you can shop at PotomacBeads.com. There's links to the materials right underneath the details of the video in this show more. You can also go back to the beginning of the videos to get the links, or go to your local Potomac bead company and we'll be happy to supply you with the products that you need. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and happy beading.